Hello, I'm Lisa, an artist, 2D animator, and lover of disillusioned office ladies.
Hello, I'm Winnie, an illustrator, designer, and fan of people giving it 1000% at karaoke.
Welcome to Heart to Hato,
a podcast where two friends have a heart-to-heart about anime.
Oh man, I'm so excited because this episode we're going into Aggretsuko, or Aggressive Retsuko. So I realized for the rest of the episodes that we've done so far, I haven't really given context for too much of the contents of the anime that we're talking about, so I'm just going to give a quick logline if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So Aggressive Retsuko, or Aggretsuko, is a Netflix anime, and we're talking about the anime specifically. There's an OVA that was released in Japan for like 100 episodes or so, but we're only going to be discussing the Netflix seasons. And for context, Aggressive Retsuko is about a 25-year-old single office lady who deals with 21st century problems for young working adults in Japan. She's this good worker by day, but vents using death metal karaoke at night. And she's made by Sanrio, so the characters are super simple and adorable, but Aggretsuko is largely an adult story, and it resonates with young adult viewers primarily. Also, there's spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to this.
That is a thing we were talking about right before we recorded today, that we did not give that disclaimer on other episodes. I hope our listeners going forward know this, that whatever we cover, it is very much a spoiler type podcast. We're giving our thoughts and overview about the entirety of a series usually, so please only listen if you're okay with spoilers or you've already watched or seen whatever we're talking about.
For sure. Before
we get into the meat of this, because we were like, oh, it's Aggretsuko. There's like 3 seasons, but they're short. They're really short episodes. It's like it's not going to be as meaty or as long as other things we recorded. And then looking at our doc of notes, I'm like, this might not be the case. And my overall prevailing feeling about what we're talking about today is really defined by the fact that few things that I've seen in recent memory can I say I have such an intense love-hate relationship with, Lisa. Like, I absolutely was so excited about Aggretsuko. I've watched all 3 seasons, and there were so many things I championed and thought was a great sort of angle that they're showing in a sort of animated form. And at the same time, okay, this show is like, it has some 11 out of 10 moments and also some 0 out of 10 moments. So I'm like, how do I rate this? I really genuinely love it with all my heart and also detest it.
Absolutely. And I would say most of those gripes are focused into the most recent season 3, right?
Yes.
For you?
Yes.
Yes, season 3. So we can champion season 1 and 2, but then it'll get spicy for season 3.
Yeah, I will say for me personally, the drop of the ball for season 3, I personally will still be watching season 4 because I am interested to see how they sort of rectified, or if they even will, to see if the hope that I have can still shine its light going forward. But the drop on the ball of season 3 was quite intense. Like, if there were fans who, just like me, had loved season 1 and 2 and decided they can't stay around after that anymore, I completely understand. It was not just like this is kind of annoying or this is disappointing. That ball drop it smashed a hole when it hit the ground, Lisa.
Well, before that, I want to get into a little bit about the creators of the series. And I feel like with some context about the creators, it might, I don't know if it'll sway your opinion. I think it might at least give you a little bit more context about how you might feel about that ending of season 3. So for Aggretsuko, it's a little bit difficult for me to find any context about who is making the series, despite it being Netflix and everything. I think it may be because there's not a lot of information about it for English-speaking people, but for Japanese people, there's like a little bit more. Maybe the creators have Twitters in Japanese that I can't read, but I don't know. But Netflix did release one video spotlighting the director of the anime. His name is Ramecho. He's a middle-aged guy, and he's kind of embarrassed that he goes by his online handle, which I kind of think is adorable. And they also spotlighted the character designer, who seemingly is a young woman named Yeti. And she kind of hides herself with a mask because she's shy. But even though she's a character designer, it seems that throughout the duration of the video, she seemed to imply that she has a big hand with the character writing as well, which I thought was really cool. So these two people are primarily the figureheads for Aggretsuko's production. So really cool fact, Retsuko in the original Japanese dub is voiced by the director's wife, and the director voices Retsuko's death metal persona when she's going off in the karaoke booth. So Sanrio loved those original voices, so they are still voicing Retsuko in the Netflix anime. When they originally pitched it to Sanrio, I think the quality of Retsuko's withering flower persona came through so well in Maricho's wife. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I know her. I feel like I am her. Like, her performance is just so great.
Yeah, I didn't know about this cool fact, which is I love that. That's so charming that this wife and husband duo voice Retsuko together. And I absolutely agree with you as well. Obviously, we've seen lots of animation that has great voice acting in it. But from day one, when I saw Aggretsuko on the screen, her voice stood out to me like no other. It was so on the dot. I also felt like I knew her just by the cadence and the way that Raricho's wife delivers Aggretsuko's performance. It's actually quite uncanny.
Yeah. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is that Raricho spoke to creating the story in the era of #MeToo, which initially I got very nervous about, but he had some great points to bring up. So throughout Aggretsuko, there's this kind of running joke that Retsuko is subjected to having to do these totally pointless things like serving tea to her boss, and that's sort of this traditional thing that women in the workplace in Japan are often subjected to, and it's super sexist because that's not expected of her male colleagues, but just because she's a woman, it's like, oh, can you grab me some tea? Can you heat up the water? Etc., etc. And that's a common joke that's been used throughout Japanese comedy. And Raricho sort of spoke to the fact that he wasn't expecting Aggretsuko to be popular overseas because he didn't think that women in the workplace would relate to these problems. But we still do, definitely. And he spoke to that he was actually a little bit disappointed that women overseas still relate to Retsuko, which is sad in its own way.
Yeah, it's if he's like trying to comment on the sort of too conservative and traditional viewpoint of gender roles in Japan, that is not a Japan specific thing. Not a show. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. It actually exists everywhere, even if the sexism faced by women in the Western workplace is not defined by the exact same things like serving tea. I don't know, maybe that's happened, but it's not something that's talked about as much, whereas it's really ingrained in Japanese society. And I just remember, like, really briefly when I was studying abroad in Japan, I had a friend who, like, she talked about that, like, you know, like, I don't remember, maybe it was like in a school setting, but I remember her distinctly telling me that she was so angry. Actually, multiple female friends told me that they were so angry that it was always such a side by comment. That seems so natural, like, hey, can you just go fetch this? Can you get some snacks, do some tea? And right, the male colleagues will never be asked of that. So it's still going on, unfortunately.
Right. And the last thing that I wanted to add is that, again, I said that Yedi, the character designer, seems to have a large hand in writing the characters as well. And she commented about how Retsuko is a huge combination of all the people that she's ever met. She draws inspiration from every single beaten down, depressed, disillusioned coworker that she's had. Retsuko's experience is basically everyone's experience. And it's, again, very sad, but also very cool that she's drawing upon this larger collective mentality that almost every young person is faced with in this society.
Yeah, I will say that Rigetti's inspiration is very, very sad, that because it reflects how women are treated in the workplace across all different kind of borders. But at the same time, that is like the charm of Aggretsuko. I remember watching the series and truly feeling that she is relatable like few other characters have been on the screen. That is a adjective I think we use often, right? We like relatable characters, whether it's TV show, movies, or anime. But to me, her character trait was like that she was showing the experience of many, many people, and I felt that. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, when I was watching, I was like, oh, like, she's a Aggretsuko, but, like, she's actually a placeholder for so many of us. And that was such a unique and really valuable way that they approached her writing and character in my eyes.
It's incredibly validating. Like, I can definitely speak to, I'm not a native Japanese person, but I grew up with some influence of Japanese culture. And that stuck with me as a young Japanese girl and then into a woman. Retsuko has this character trait of being a good girl, an iko in the in the Japanese dub. And I was just like, oh my god, I grew up at being the iko. You know what I mean? Like, I was the good girl, even if it hurt me, even if it disadvantaged me against my peers. Like, I would always play that part. And you're right, it's just incredibly relatable, even for overseas people, I feel like, but especially for East Asian women.
Yeah, I would say similarly. Yeah, my background is Chinese, and I have yet to spend a majority of, well, not majority, but like a long-term position in a kind of traditional 9-to-5 company. But so many of the things that Aggretsuko deals with that she finds frustrating, I relate to as well, because I also was called the good girl my whole life. And sort of bringing that up, I realized how much of a barrier that was in various circumstances, even if it was not the workplace like the anime is. So it really, really permeates a lot of areas, but especially I think for East Asian women, like you mentioned.
For sure. Like I said, I'm the same, Winnie. I haven't done a 9-to-5 office job at all, but it happens in school, where you're being the good girl and people will praise you for it, but later in life it comes back to hurt you.
Yeah, no, it is really a double-edged sword. You get praise when you do well, but if you mess up or you show any sort of ugly emotions like every human does, it doesn't make us irrational whatsoever. It comes back like, oh, but I thought you were the good girl. So why are you acting like this right now? Like sorry to call out my mother publicly on the podcast. She's done that. Like, my mother has said that sort of thing, and it doesn't come from it doesn't come from a place of wanting to hurt you like that, but it still inevitably does. So it very much is a double-edged sword in that way. But anyway, I sort of wanted to transition because Lisa and I both have some very overreaching thoughts about Aggretsuko that kind of span the entire series. But we thought maybe we could go some thoughts about each season chronologically first before we get to that, because there's some arcs or some characters that are most prominent in certain parts of the story. So we don't want to jump around too much and make it that confusing.
Right. We're just going to follow the season timeline. So speaking of which, we're going to go into season 1, which I didn't remember too much about, but then checking through it, there's actually quite a bit to talk about because it introduces so many characters. And there's already like a few roots that are brought up, like Retsuko's relationship with marriage, for one. But,
sorry.
No, sorry. I was just like, I
was like waiting for Lisa to drop her mic and be like, "All right, this is what I have to say."
I guess okay. I will say it's kind of also a relatable thing. this concept of Aggretsuko, or Retsuko. I keep wanting to call her Aggretsuko, but her name is Retsuko.
Oh, right, yeah, her name is Retsuko.
Yeah. This seed is sort of planted and grows throughout the rest of the seasons, but she's constantly looking at marriage as a potential out of her job, which is totally understandable. It's something that is very pervasive in Japanese culture, that a woman might want to find love in her 20s and then settle down as a housewife for the rest of her life, I guess. And I can't blame her for wanting to take that route either, even though it's very traditional and very, I don't want to say regressive, because that's not right.
Yeah. No, I sort of understand where you're coming from, because I also have very complicated emotions and feelings about such an idea. Of course, I would never shame like a woman wanting that. And yet at the same time, and this is sort of shown a little bit in this anime, is the angle of not truly wanting that, like actually, and more so seeing it as an escape. You're just choosing one slightly more favorable option over a much more unfavorable option. And then we'll see for season 2 that Retsuko does show her perspective on that I champion a lot more. But that just as a concept in general, like, you know, for Japanese women, speaking in sort of overgeneralization, that those two choices, I'm like, I wish that it wasn't the way that it is set up, where it feels like they're just two maybe not great things and you have to pick one that will be slightly less bad for you. And I don't know,
I mean, if you think about it, she hasn't moved up, like, in her entry-level position. Maybe that is the next step for her. But, yeah. Yeah,
it's... But that's it's a very, from the get-go, a sort of dilemma that the show kind of presents to us, and it will keep being brought up as a theme throughout the other seasons. I saw that you wanted to talk a little bit about Sonoda and Feniko, which I actually kind of forgot about Sonoda, but
she sort of doesn't play a major role in the series, but I think she's great. I really love her. Sonoda is the most... Lisa just loves a girl boss, and Sonoda takes what she has in society and she uses it. She's cold, calculating in the inside, but on the outside, she knows how to be the kawaii girl. She knows how to butter up her chauvinistic boss. She knows how to go sugoi over like the most mundane shit that her boss has to show her. And it's so funny to me. I laugh at those sequences every time. And then on the flip side, Feniko, who absolutely hates that kind of attitude, but is also petty in her own way. I just love the dichotomy of that, and the concept of these like outwardly very cute women, but they have this quote unquote rotten side to them that make them really compelling as characters, because again, it's like, I feel like I know them. I feel like I know these women who are petty, these women who use their femininity to get up in the world, and you cannot freaking blame them for that.
Yeah, it is really interesting that they're both very petty, but kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, because Feniko does look down upon Sonoda a lot. I realized that I was not a fan of Sonoda as I watched the series, but I'm like, how much of that is because of how society has taught me to feel about such women? Because right, if you look at her in a different way, and sort of the way you look at her, she's just like really smart and calculating. Whereas I found her to be, you know, frivolous or superficial or whatnot. And I'm like, okay, but how much of that is also we're taught that such women are bad? You know, like there's so many layers to that. So upon a closer inspection...
Oh, sorry. I just to defend Sonoda, because I feel like she's aware of her rottenness, but it's her self-defense mechanism, and it's either that or she could be like Aggretsuko. You know?
What about Feniko? Because I love Feniko. But don't like Tsunoda. Like, I really, really love Feniko. The way that she is petty and the way that she is disillusioned, I'm like, oh yeah, I vibe with that. Maybe Tsunoda's just too glitzy for me. But so here's the thing. What I'm saying is, I do not personally like Sonoda. If she were a real person, I don't think I'd want to. I'm sort of like Retsuko, like the way that Retsuko is around her. I don't think that Retsuko has a great time interacting with her, but I appreciate her a lot as a character and the sort of themes that she is presenting in her arc that you mentioned. I appreciate a lot. But
I think
I'd be friends with Feniko. That's not
true.
Sonoda.
I would be friends with Feniko, but I think what compelled me about Tsunoda is that she was willing to be upfront with Aggretsuko about who she really is. You know, like they sat down and had conversations where Tsunoda was her real self around Aggretsuko and gave, I keep saying Aggretsuko, but she gave Retsuko, you know, advice and all this stuff. I was just like, it's nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I understand where you're coming from. Like, I wouldn't be friends with her, but
she's a really good character. I wrote down Kabae because I don't know if you really have much to say about her. She's like the hippopotamus kind of older lady character with young children and a husband, but she kind of went through a charming arc in my eyes, where in the beginning I like we will be saying this about many characters in the Aggretsuko universe, but at the start, her whole persona made me immediately just like start just like reverberating, like, oh, I know who you are. Like, I know who you are in a workplace setting. You're that older sort of like middle-aged woman who means well, but you're so nosy and you're so passive aggressive. You say so many things that seem like nice compliments and are encouraging to Retsuko at first, but jab at her underneath, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like quaking and shaking. I'm in fear of you because I know exactly who you are.
Right.
But then and okay, maybe again, this is just me simping for the family stuff. I think it was really when we see her outside of the workplace setting and then you see her with her kids and her really like docile seeming husband. I was like, I became a little more sympathetic to her, right? That's not to justify her passive aggressive behavior, because it is like sometimes not appropriate. It's not exactly what you want in a workplace setting where it would benefit other people if she were a little more professional. But I sort of like reflected on everything that she done, and instead of seeing her as actually calculating and always purposely being aggressive, passive aggressive for some insidious reason, I was like, oh, you are just like a well-meaning mother who does things that are passive aggressive sometimes, but you mean well. And I don't know why I found that like kind of endearing. I don't know how I would deal with an actual person like that in my real life, but I was like,
right,
come on.
I mean, it's the same for the pig boss. I forgot his name. Ton.
Oh, Ton.
Yeah. You also kind of peek at his family and, you know, a little bit of his inner motivations and stuff. And obviously he's a horrible character to Retsuko, but
yeah,
the anime still gives these characters a hint of a richer inner life or different motivations than what they might present outside of the workplace, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you know what I think we can say, despite anything else that might be a shortfalling, the show does a great job of always humanizing every character to some degree, even if they're very much a side character. They don't play a larger role in the whole series. No one is shown to be completely flat. No one is just evil for no reason. You know, they all have their own motivations that, as the series goes on, we usually see a peek of, and I appreciate that a lot, right? Even for a character like Ton, who is so easy to hate because, yeah, he's horribly sexist and very abusive and creates a very toxic work environment. When you see his daughters come into the picture, you sort of do just nod your head like, yeah, I get it a bit.
Right. I mean, that happens in real life all the time. If you've ever had like someone that you meet at work or at school that you think is like a totally evil person, that's just their work persona. And then, maybe you see that teacher at the grocery store with their family and they smile at you and you think about that for like 10 minutes like, oh my god, they have a life outside of school.
You're a real person with emotions and a
person.
colorful arc.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about Gori and Washimi, which they are one of my favorite parts of the entire series. Like you also mentioned, I didn't remember that much about season 1, so I actually had thought that they played a larger part in season 2, because season 1 I think was them just like we're introduced to them, they just start getting into the picture, and they kind of begin a baby friendship with Retsuko, but it's not until season 2 that it's like the established trio, that they're regularly hanging out and you're really seeing them. But since they appear, let's talk about them. Let's talk about Gori and Washimi.
I think they did play a large part in season 1. I don't remember if in season 1 Retsuko showed her death metal side to them or not. I think she did.
I think it was like the end of season 1.
Right. It warmed my heart so much, that duo, and then integrating Retsuko into it, the solidarity of women in the workplace. I was just like, oh my goodness, if I was Retsuko and I had these two like older women, like senior in my workplace, looking after me, I would be so happy, so charmed, so grateful. Oh, I just love that.
They're the real girl bosses, Lisa.
Right.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I have anything intelligent to say. It's just me singing praise about these two because I love them so much. I love their contrast of personality. They're both pretty high up in positions within this company, but Gori's sort of more like dramatic, and she's a lot more nosy, and she's just got this like outbound of energy and kind of that gossipy mom vibe. And Washimi is like calm, cool, collected, sexy without trying to be, and yeah, the way that they support Retsuko is like so comforting. I mean, that is something I'll mention with other things that happen as well in the series, where Retsuko is dealing with so much BS on a daily basis, but then something comes into her life that is very deserved, and these two are an example of that, where like even if other things in her day-to-day workplace environment isn't changing, she has now this sort of sanctuary where she can rant about all of these things, and they understand and they support her, which I find just so amazing.
Right. I mean, I hope the series encourages more of those types of relationships in the workplace. I personally think it's like a dream to think of other women looking out for me and defending me or trying to help me out. That's great. I just love it. I love it. It warms my heart.
Yeah, because think about so many of the other series as well, where you have a female protagonist and she's struggling with some sort of structural issue, whether it's within a school or workplace, and the antagonist is like, I cannot swear. How do I say this word? The female dog like antagonist who's like really catty. She's really gossipy. She wants to quote unquote steal her man, or she wants to spread rumors, or I don't know. I'm thinking about like, a High School Musical
genre.
Type. Yeah, shoujo genre, but like, like Sharpay from High School Musical, like that kind of female antagonist. And that doesn't exist in Aggretsuko as a series, which on that end we can just say thank you, right? Like there is not one prevailing antagonist who is that catty female, because I think it very much easily could have been that. There are lots of different characters. The antagonists generally tend to be men. But so yeah, that solidarity with the female friendship and their support of her is so warming, so powerful, so empowering. And I also enjoyed, I think, kind of more Gori specific. Maybe they do this with Shimi as well, but my memory could be a little faulty. But Gori is sort of being at a good place in her professional career, right? She's pretty high up. She has a lot of successes going on for her. And then later on in the season, she has her own personal projects or a company idea that she wants to pursue. But Gori, I like that them showing like her sort of specific struggles as well. Like, even if you get higher up in the company and things are kind of quote unquote better for you, it's not like the sexism stops or like you're not gonna have struggles as well. Like, I think one of Gori's is dating, right? Like,
right.
which like that is very relatable, because think about all the I don't know, did she kind of mention that because she's sort of powerful within a professional setting, like that could be a deterrent for potential dating prospects, which is like a very real concern for some women, because not all men, but I think some men are actually intimidated by very successful women, right? So
yes, that in her age was also a deterrent
yes.
For her dating life.
Yeah, so I wish she didn't have those struggles, but what I enjoyed was them showing that in the series, adding just like another layer of relatability to the female experience, whether you're young, single, and you kind of not super high up in a company structure yet, or like you're kind of older and you are high up. Like, you can still you might still have some similar struggles sometimes, or you'll have one specific to where you are in your life, but I liked seeing that reflected. There's just a wealth of different female perspectives in the show, which I really appreciate.
Me too. I before we wrap up season 1, I did want to talk about Rasasuke, her temporary boyfriend. Okay, so I think that arc in the scheme of things is a little bit forgettable, but I still think it was valuable to see. So Rasasuke is kind of a goof. He's not really great at picking up on Retsuko's social cues. And I think what his character was supposed to represent in the series is the concept of herbivore men in Japanese society, which basically means there's this kind of phenomena of non-assertive men, gentle men who aren't active pursuers of relationships with women. Maybe they kind of take an inactive or passive role in that process. It doesn't necessarily mean that they won't date women, but I think it's more of the idea that they won't be as aggressive about it. And this term is frequently used, if I remember correctly, in a derogatory way, where generally a lot of Japanese conservatives will be down on this concept of herbivore men as being irresponsible, or maybe they're too feminine, contributing to Japan's problems with the declining birth rate and stuff. And to be honest, I feel like I've met herbivore men as well, and I know this type of Japanese guy, but I really enjoyed how he was depicted. Even though he was a bad boyfriend to Retsuko, you got this idea that he still had this rich inner life where he was literally a herbivore. He was surrounded by plants in his room, and he had his own concerns and desires about his life that maybe didn't concern dating or women, and he didn't. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just thought it was very charming. Okay, I know that he was annoying and a little bit of a dummy when it came to her feelings, but I don't know, maybe he felt pressured to be in this relationship because it's socially expected of him, but I don't know. Sorry, I got a little bit jumbled there, but
no,
that's
you're
my
fine.
defense of Rasasuke.
You're right that his arc was sort of forgettable. Like, it was not only until I reviewed all 3 seasons that I even remembered him as a character, but everything you brought up actually surprised me, because it brought up a lot that I had to say as well, even though I very recently didn't even remember he existed. As a viewer, you obviously cheer for Retsuko, so it's very easy to dislike him because, yeah, he is kind of a dummy. He doesn't pick up on cues. He's a bad lover. But commenting if we consider him like a metaphor or a stand-in for this phenomenon, quote unquote, of the herbivore man in Japan overall, I have so many things to say about that concerning gender roles and sexism and the duality of sexism. Like, yeah, this sort of derogatory nature of the term herbivore man speaks a lot to, I think, sort of bad Japanese values. Like, because I've read in so many manga or see anime where like not like actual side characters, but just like passing characters behind the main characters in like a cafe for like a couple shots, and they're used as a device to mention something about their lives to so that the main characters of the actual manga can think about something. But so many women actually in manga anime like talk about relationship troubles with a herbivore man, like, oh, he's not aggressive enough, why doesn't he just kiss me? Like, do I have to tell him everything? Like, why doesn't he just get it? Like, why does he come after me? Why doesn't he chase me? Why doesn't he, come at me more like a predator? Right? Like, this is something I've like seen a lot in fiction, and that's not to say fiction is reality, but I think it is reflecting some reality in the Japanese mindset. So it's I think there is this sort of undertone of herbivore man are bad because they're not manly men. They're too docile. Like, they are part of Japan's problem with the declining birth rate or etc. or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, did we need another example of why sexism hurts everyone? It's not just one subset of people. Because there are these like double standards, right? So, right. I don't think anyone's gonna say that Sasuke is necessarily a fan favorite character, but what he's kind of getting me to think about those things. I'm like, wow, that hits. That does hit, actually.
Right. I mean, I look at his arc and I don't necessarily blame him for his behavior. I think that's just his personality, and I feel like it's okay to just let him be him, And to be honest, if you had switched Sasuke and made him into a female character and retained all of those traits that he has, he would actually be a desirable, like, heterosexual female character. But because he's a man, he's expected to be a certain way during Retsuko's dates with him, and he doesn't really get it, and that's fine. Like, I feel like he shouldn't feel like he has to be that type of person. He doesn't have to be Retsuko's boyfriend, it's just like, just let him hang out with his plants. I don't know.
I think that's a really clever little pun by the writers in general, to be like, he is a actual herbivore, plants everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that end, we go to season 2, and is there anything you wanted to say? 'Cause I have lots of things I could say, Lisa.
You go ahead, because I feel like you guys, Anai and Tadano better than I do.
I wish my thoughts were structured in a very intelligent, easy to understand way, but I wrote down Anai and Tadano because they're two of the most defining characters of this season. They get sort of like the biggest arcs, and I have such complicated feelings about both of them. I mean, I don't think anyone can really say they like Anai.
No. But he was a really interesting character because I was always looking forward to see how Retsuko could possibly deal with this type of personality.
Yes.
I've never met an Anai in my life, but I'm terrified now that I will. Does this type of man exist?
I've also never met an Anai, and I'm sure they exist outside of Japan as well, but it seemed really, I was like, oh, I could imagine a person like this. Maybe not to this extreme, but within a Japanese workplace setting, because of the specific pressures that I think Japanese society could put on someone and make kind of forced him into a corner to be that reclusive, and then he reached a boiling point where reaching that boiling point, he started to drag other people into his web, such as Letsuko, and really make a living hell for her. He was a really compelling character setup, but I have a hard time sort of championing him as like a good way to move the plot forward, because I'm like, they took him too far, didn't they? Like, I'm like, isn't this a bit too extreme? Like, after a certain point, it made me extremely uncomfortable. I understood that for the series overall, the sort of arc they were going for, and giving her challenges and showing how mundane and horrible and abusive maybe a workplace setting could be for someone like her, but after a certain point, it felt like she was just suffering incessantly, and
right.
that to me like left a bad taste in my mouth. You know what I mean? Like, where you give trials and tribulations to a character and you can like really push it to reach a emotional climax or a peak of a story, but it just felt like she was being tortured every day, and it made me kind of like kind of sick. It was at the end of the season that like he calms down, he gets a bit of a redemption arc, he's like learned to express his emotions a bit better, and I think later on, like Nai and Letsuko, they're like fine, they're able to interact as like just acquaintances, colleagues in the workplace. But like, does he ever apologize? Is he like she just like, I was just like, Letsuko just suffered incessantly. Like, I didn't know what to make of that.
Right. It's hard to think of a solution for that arc other than just cutting it faster than it had already gone through, because I understand Retsuko letting it get to that point, because I would also be that person who would let it get to like a really extreme point. But I totally see what you're saying. I think this is like an issue that is beyond the season as well, or beyond this arc, that the Retsuko suffering is a little too intense.
I was gonna say that's a bit of a spoiler for my later overall comments about the series. That can just be like, it is just defined by one bullet point, which is you've made Retsuko suffer too much.
Right.
And the thing is, I might have felt differently if season 3 went a little bit differently, because the way that in which she suffers from this passive aggressive colleague, Anai, who suffered a lot of trauma, and the sort of pop star route she goes in season 3, they reflect a sort of realism. I don't know if realism is the right word. Obviously, it's still kind of fantasy, but a sort of like, it is not completely unbelievable that A led to B to C, and that is why she suffered in those specific ways. But I just felt like for this one series and for this one character, she keeps getting the short end of the stick, and that to me felt like it took away some of the realism that was set up. Like, why are you just showing me this poor young, like somewhat youthful, like she is a full-on adult, but like still relatively young female worker, just keep getting beat down and beat down and beat down. But anyway, I guess I really don't know how to end my comments about Anai other than you made me really uncomfortable, but that is nothing compared to what I will say when we get to season 3.
Oh yeah. Please
and then Tadano.
Take it away for Tadano, please do, because he's smexy, but
Tadano is Elon Musk in a hot donkey costume. Make of that what you will. He is like, is he my problematic fave, Lisa?
Yes, have a problematic fave. You know, I already problematic favorited Sonoda, so please.
There we go. Yes, he's hot. Like, what the fudge? They made this like blue donkey man just have the way he talks and the way he looks, just he got the moves, man. He's suave, but he is also a multi-billionaire, big corp. He's just like, he's in the 1%. You know what I mean? And he's presented in a way where he's not like scheming and trying to, you know, completely destroy the Amazon rainforest so he can make more money, but he's depicted as really kind and sort of naive, naive and well-meaning, but it's that naive part that I'm like, I squint my eyes at. This is why you're my problematic fave, because I love seeing you on screen. Yeah, you're a hot donkey, but his privilege, his naivety is hard to ignore. You know what I mean?
I think primarily what stood out to me about him as a flaw is that he's right about many things, but
right.
He's not considerate in his approach. And
yeah,
yeah. That was what stood out to me as his major flaw, other than his naivete.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think my main problem with him, you know, because we can all have certain passionate feelings about billionaires, but he is not an empathetic character. His naivety comes out in like actually pretty hurtful ways, and it's one of the main reasons that Tadano and Retsuko break up, right? He is not able to see, and he doesn't seem to want to put in the effort to see someone else's point of view, which when you're like that sort of rich person, you may feel like you don't need to. Like, why would you? You're like on top of the world. So I think that's like, I guess both of our problems with him, right? Where he is not empathetic. And I will say that season 2's ending broke my heart in a very bittersweet way, because Retsuko suffers so much up to this point, even in season 1 as well, right? But Anai really put her through the ringer. And then when she met Tadano and everything just seemed like it was going right for her, and I was like, heck yeah. Sometimes you just meet someone, you start dating, and it goes well. Retsuko totally deserves that. Don't make her dating life a whole complicated mess as well. But of course, as this season went on, we were nearing the end. I was like, this would betray the point of the show if the season 2 ended with, oh, things are perfect. She marries Tadano, the end. Like, her life is all good now. So we knew that something was coming. And the reason I say bittersweet was how they depicted that falling apart. While I'm sad for Retsuko, when she stood up for herself and tried to explain to him, yes, I understand you love me and you care about me, and marriage is not something you need to validate our romantic relationship in the eyes of society. And, you know, you're like this forward-thinking billionaire man. You're like, who cares about the traditional conservative methods that people are so used to, such as the nuclear family, such as marriage, such as whatever. I understand that, but I'm telling you that I still need marriage. I want it. It is something that I desire for my life, and if you cannot give that to me, this isn't going to work out. And he can't, right? Like, he's not going to change his stance for her. But for me, I was like, I was ready to get out drums and like a glow stick and, like, you know, put a white bandana around my forehead and be like, yes, let's go. Yes, my girl, you stood up for yourself. I am the queen. I am the president of your fan club. Like, right. So this sorry, go.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry. I just want to say that it's one of the few times in the series where she doesn't completely lay down and just take it. And I'm so proud of her for that, because thank goodness it actually shows her developing throughout the series. Like, the time isn't wasted. Her experiences aren't wasted, and she can advocate for herself. That's the greatest finale for season 2 you could have given me.
Exactly.
Even if it was bittersweet.
No, exactly. No, the bittersweet aspect of it is not a criticism. Like, I really thought the ending of season 2 was fantastic. It really, like, it set up what I thought was going to be a fantastic rest of this series, which It's not exactly the case, as we'll talk about when we get to season 3. But yeah, the way she stood up for herself, she's not going to compromise on this one thing at all. And I wanted to just bring this quickly a little bit to the beginning of season 1 when we talked about this idea of women seeing marriage as an out and as an escape from a soul-sucking job. And my initial kind of having sort of complicated feelings about that, and just like not enjoying that as a reality for women is just like you have two unfavorable options. But for Retsuko specifically, just her character, I like that this end of season 2 gave us her answer for herself, which is marriage is not for her just an escape. Like she actually just wants that. She desires it. It's what she wants. And I'm like, thank you. Every woman is her own person. They can have their own ideas about whatever, but I just like that they showed to us for her what it meant, how much it actually means to her. And that is her own personal answer. And I loved that. Thank you so much. I'm cheering for you, Retsuko. You put your foot down at the end of season 2. And I was like, it's like a cry, just crying internally and pumping my fist like, yeah, go my girl. And then season 3 happens.
Yeah. Well, I did want to wrap up that thought that marriage as an arc for her, I'm glad that it was able to evolve, because initially in season 1 she really did see it as an escape, but then as she was confronted with more situations of like, she was set up with that one polar bear guy, right, through her mom. Yes. And she could have taken that route too, but she just wasn't feeling it. And again, with Tadano, she could have taken this route where she didn't have to marry, but it was basically marriage. But she has like so many different. She's very picky about her own marriage, which good, good.
Heck yeah,
that's what you deserve.
You actually have a wealth of choice. You are such a freaking catch. Let's go, and you should not settle down with anybody unless your heart is truly with it.
Right. Sorry, but to move on to season 3.
Season 2, fantastic. And then, so when season 3 comes along, I think a lot of us invested fans were really wondering where the show is going to take it now, right? Because such a major arc had finished for her. And what can I say other than they made Haida an incel, and I'm furious, Lisa. I'm like a pot about to boil over, a volcano about to explode. That this recurring character, you know, Haida and Feniko are like her two closest friends in her everyday work life. He's a bit of a sympathetic character. Like, you know, he has this huge crush on Retsuko this whole time, and you get this feeling it's not gonna work out, right? Because they're not a good match. Retsuko doesn't give him the time of day. She doesn't see him as a romantic possibility at all, but he's kind of sympathetic in that way that he just has this irrevocable crush on her, and he's just like a well-meaning guy, he's nice or whatever, and then they made him into an incel. Now, why do I say that, right? Is towards the end of the season, the sort of the climax, he just inserts himself in Retsuko's life in such a self-centered creepy self-centered, you owe me something kind of way. Like, you know, when do you remember when Feniko asks him like why he even likes her?
Yes, I do remember that, but I don't remember his answer.
Okay, so they kind of did this wishy-washy thing where they showed this flashback of he stayed behind late one day to do work just as Retsuko did, and he caught wind of her like getting water from the water station, and he was just like, yeah, little moments. I don't know, I just liked her. And I'm like, okay, all right, okay. Which, here's the thing, I don't think that someone liking someone else in a romantic way, and when asked about it, has to be able to give a bullet list. That's not necessarily, I think, what defines love either. Like, it is kind of charming, I guess, if you just take that moment in of itself of him being like, I don't have this grand sweeping reason, like, I just I just really enjoyed spending time with her, watching her. I find her like really endearing, whatever. But the problem is the show makes it very clear, like, he doesn't actually know Retsuko. Like, he really does not know her as a person. He doesn't understand her struggles. She doesn't really confide in him. They don't have that close relationship. And, you know, you can still have a crush and be romantically interested in someone in that way, but his obsession starts to fuel really problematic behavior, because this whole time he's up to that point he's presented as sort of sympathetic character who just really cares for him cares for her, and everything he does is for her well-being. He doesn't have expectations, right? Like, it would be great if they could end up together, but he's just doing it because he genuinely cares. But after okay, we're gonna have to do a bit of backtracking later, because this is really at the end of season 3, after she suffers her immense trauma, he like shows up at her house and starts yelling at her after less than a week has passed, where she suffered an event that she could have died in, and he's like telling her what to do with her life and like telling her to get her act together, and you know, telling her
he
like
has no right.
He has no right. He's like telling her to go back to work.
It's so frustrating, because with Haida, I couldn't tell how the show's trying to frame him, because he was doing all this weird and creepy stuff that, to me and to most women who have ever known a Haida or have witnessed a Haida, which I have witnessed a Haida type, is like really creepy. It's annoying. It's frustrating. You want him to stop, but I couldn't tell if the show is trying to frame that in a way that maybe it's like actually kind of romantic, or I'm not sure. And because of that, because they didn't explicitly frame his actions as bad or creepy, I think that's what set so many people off about season 3 and about him specifically.
No, absolutely everything you said I agree with, and I found it so disgusting, left such a terrible taste in my mouth. I mean, I wonder if you'll even remember a brief scene when we're shown Gori and she's working on like a dating app in her own free time, right? And Haida tries it out, and he finds that his like 99% match is Retsuko by the swords of fate or whatnot, and I don't know, it's like those little things, and it just gets into his head again, I think, where he's like, I can't give up on her, even if I don't really know her as a person, even though she's made it very clear she is not interested in me. Like, I have to go after her. Like, I need to make something of this. And imagine a man acting that way to another woman in real life. That is, I think, not far from calls of getting a restraining order. I'm like, right. You showed me, I forget the OP's name, if you'll remember, because Lisa, you showed me a comic you found on Twitter of someone analyzing season 3, and one panel was kind of showing the actions that Haida's actions towards Retsuko and her stalker's actions, and there's like parallels. They do kind of the similar things.
Right, that comic was made by at Batshaped on Twitter, and they had some really compelling visual analysis of how Aggretsuko season 3 is a little bit roundabout in her character development. And not only that, right, it was showing the parallels between Haida and her stalker, and it's a very compelling read. I would highly recommend going to find that on Twitter. But I think it sort of visualizes almost everyone's complaint about this series or about this season, which is too bad, because I kind of enjoyed the other parts of the season, but they're so overshadowed by the Haida stuff. Like, I really enjoyed her foray into the idol scene, and her having a new hobby to pick up where she can show off her awesome talents in death metal singing, getting empowered by that. But it's so muddled by the toxicity of these relationships that she has with Haida and her stalker, and Haida's relationship with Inui as well, which is terribly disappointing, because Inui, she's hot, she's smexy. How could you do this, Haida? How could you do this? I'm so sad.
Yo, Inui, if you're free, I'm available. I'll go on a date with you. Jeez.
Miss Ma'am.
Miss Ma'am. I want to wrap up the Haida thing a little bit because, as you mentioned, this does transition well to the overall trauma and the stalker arc of this season. I don't know if any of the things I said about Haida was very coherent because it might have been overshadowed by my immense rage and me, like, consciously trying not to scream into my mic right now about how upset I am about that whole thing. But I'll just say this. My disappointment with him is how basically everything he did in season 3 culminated in this screaming message of Retsuko owes me something. Retsuko owes me something because I love her so much. I did all of this for her. How can she not? Like, she owes me something. Even if he doesn't believe he thinks that, his actions and the way that he treats her, like freaking showing up at her house unannounced, and it's just so disgusting. I hate that. And so in that way, it's like, how different are you from the stalker? The stalker did everything he did because he also thinks that Retsuko owes him something. Like, Retsuko should be a certain way. But anyway, let's go into...
It would have been different if the show was self-aware about the whole Haida arc. I'm sorry to like keep it going, but like...
No, you're fine.
If they can totally fix this, season 4, they can fix this as long as they are mindful about the critiques that primarily women should have about season 3. And I trust that they can do it because the character designer is so involved with the writing process of the show, seemingly. I don't know. I think they can fix it, but we'll see.
So do you remember no, you're fine. Remember for season 2, one of my major complaints was, oh my god, they are just making Retsuko suffer incessantly. Like, what point are they trying to make? Season 3 took that up a notch. Like, a stalker? It sort of
that scene where he was holding her hand, it gave me literal chills, and it was very unpleasant to watch.
I am amazed. Maybe Japan has different media standards, but the fact that it's released on Netflix, which is like a worldwide accessible platform, I'm like amazed, dumbfounded, sad, was terrified as I saw stuff on screen that there wasn't like a content or trigger warning. Like, how many women do you think could, like, okay, not just women, I don't want to say just people, could have like started suffering a panic attack or hyperventilate from seeing stuff on screen? It made my skin crawl, you know? And I will say, like, the whole arc with the stalker, it like, I was like, am I watching a kawaii version of Perfect Blue? Which
oh my goodness.
Which, you know, albeit, I'll say this on the side, I think is one of Khan's best works. But you kind of know what you're getting into when you start watching Perfect Blue. Like, it is marketed as, like, a psychological thriller. Like, you know there's going to be heavy content. And with Retsuko, every fan up to this point, we've seen, like, her experience hardships. But she almost died. Like, someone was out to physically harm her, if not, like, murder her. And they just... There was no warning for that. It was extremely jarring, slap us in the face with that. And... okay, never mind all of that shock value, right, Lisa? My bigger complaint, my bigger concern, the thing that really kept my blood boiling long after I'd finished the season was how they then dealt with the trauma or lack of dealing with it.
Right. There is a significant... the show is so wanting of needing Retsuko to heal, but it's not that easy. And... they were so cruel to her. The characters are so cruel to her in the context of what happened. And I think that's even more triggering than what happened to her, to be honest.
No, I will agree with that. For me personally, that was what triggered me more. Because, you know, seeing an X-Acto blade being pulled on her while very, very, you know, very shock value, very just viscerally upsetting. The way that they brushed over the trauma, and obviously everyone would deal with trauma differently, but it seemed so superficial how they like swept it underneath the rug and kind of gave us the message that, oh, all she needed was a week lying in bed at home, and then she's fine. And okay, this is kind of like a comment about the series as a whole, but that really is apparent in season 3, this idea of regressive character development. So as it pertains to her healing from the trauma, like so much of the Aggretsuko series is defined by, the world, especially her workplace environment, beating Retsuko down. But slowly she's going to gain the strength and knowledge to stand up for herself. She's going to make something of her own. And then the end of season 3 is she did stand up for herself. Like when Ton yelled at her to stop being a pop star because then she can't focus on her regular office job, she's like, it culminates in, no, I'm gonna keep being a idol. I want to do this. And then when Haida, unannounced, criminally just shows up at her house and demands in and yells at her to come back to work even though she almost just died, she's like, no, like I'm not gonna go back to work right now. And then the end of season 3 is, less than a week later she was gonna quit being an idol and also she went back to work.
Yeah. I'm still so caught up with the stalker stuff in my head because I want to ask, like, do you feel like that was valuable to the plot, or do you feel like that was like a valuable depiction of idol culture? Because the thing is, I'm not mad about the fact that this aspect was shown in Aggretsuko, and I think it's actually pretty important. I think it's just really the treatment of it and the lack of warning. Yeah, I liked the concept that she had to come face to face with this aspect of Japanese society because that's kind of what Aggretsuko is all about. But it's hard because I think about what are some solutions to season 3, and it's hard for me to come up with the right answers other than redo the Haida stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is not like a overly dramatic thing to add about having a stalker, because I know, I'm sure celebrities everywhere, it's not just in Japan, but idol culture specifically, it tends to really breed some obsessive fans like that, like it's been on the news somewhat often. I've seen like this reality being shown a lot. So I think I might tend to agree with you on that. Like, it's not that I'm upset they thought of including that, but it's really the horrible treatment of it. There was no tact. It wasn't shown in any thoughtful way. It was, I'm sure, very jarring for a lot of people. Like, I talked to my own friends after we finished the series, and so many of them expressed this immense like horror and how like it made them want to throw up because it just was thrown at them with no warning. So I don't know, in the Retsuko universe, it really felt like it didn't provide a lot of substance. It felt like it was shown much more for shock value than anything else, and I have a huge gripe with that. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that without giving us some real substance to justify that in the writing? I don't like, what do you think they were going for, Lisa? That's what I'm just so confused about. I'm like, what did you want us to think at the end of season 3?
So my feelings about it were, this is why I'm so like confused about the framework of Haida in season 3. I think that the stalker stuff was supposed to set up so that Haida could come in and swoop in and be the hero for Retsuko, but it's complicated because I think the show wants to give him like flaws and nuance in this sense, but I think from my perspective, the show really wants to push him as Retsuko's love interest and wants to push their relationship further, and the stalker thing was convenient for that, and so they pushed that as much as possible so Haida could be that good guy. But it's almost blocked by the fact that Retsuko is a pretty nuanced show, and it backfired because of that. And so many women watch it and know that this is not the right framework to show Haida in.
Yeah, if they were trying to show Haida as a hero, they definitely missed the mark because it left a lot of viewers feeling really uncomfortable and maybe kind of even disgusted. And I'm thinking about I'm thinking kind of about romantic narratives in East Asian media, and I'm wondering if they were, because I think we lauded Aggretsuko as a series for having some really intelligent and nuanced writing and sort of philosophies like this, or messages they're trying to get across. But maybe this part was one that they were going at something much more not nuanced, which is, I feel like a lot of East Asian media is permeated by this idea of ultimate romance is someone who sticks it through. Think about all the stories about unrequited love, Lisa. That's like every other anime ever.
Yes. And then, the person who's most dedicated, who's been there from the start, they're the one that will usually win at the end of the story. And I think that's what they're trying to go through here with Haida.
Right. Okay. So I'm making up a theory because talking to you right now in real time is giving me theories. My brain is, the cogs are turning as we speak. If that's what they were going for, like, oh, this classic message of the most pure, the most honorable form of romance is somebody who sticks it through, that even if that person doesn't like them, they don't give up, right? That's the message. Like, you don't give up, you stick it through, and you go for them, because if you believe they're the one for you, you can usually change their mind. They can come around if you just stick it through, right? I think maybe if the writers were trying to get that message across, what audience members such as me read instead was, you're telling women that if you like them enough, they owe you something. And those are that's really horrible.
It is really horrible. But it's I think you're right. There's something to East Asian stereotypical romance that they're trying to imbue here. And I think they fussed it by trying to make it nuanced, but by making it nuanced, it kind of got grosser as it went. And the thing is, I don't know who to blame for it, because the production of it is so secretive. Yes, the director is a man, but he's super influenced by the comments of the character designer or the influence of his wife. It could very well be that a female voice on the team was like, well, what if we push the drama and the romance more? And it just kind of got fussed with maybe like a stereotypical East Asian kind of gross, weird narrative.
Right. Because I was going to say, it would be such an easy judgment, right? To be like, oh, I'm sure like it was mostly men being involved in this production, and that must be why it has this lens, when that's clearly not the case for this production team. And it could very much be like, you know, female voices that led it to be this way. Because think about shoujo as a genre. Mm-hmm. That is usually written by women for other young girls, and this kind of narrative is there all the time. It permeated so much of the shoujo content I consumed growing up. This idea that, oh, it's so hot and sexy and romantic when the man is possessive. Oh, we love those kabedons. Pin me up to the wall. Tell me that I can't leave you, that I'm the only one for you, and I owe you something. Right? So growing up, I didn't read those messages as you owe me something. I read them as romantic, because that, when you're inundated with that is enough as an impressionable young child, you might start to believe that. And now as an adult, and I've gone through more life experiences and I have a different point of view, I see similar narratives as I did, which I might have absolutely adored as a young kid, but now kind of leave a disgusting taste in my mouth, because all I see is men trying to claim agency over women and tell them that they owe something when they don't.
Absolutely. And I think it's, it's already a case of, they already established that for Retsuko, this kind of herbivore man wasn't for her, but then they pushed it the other angle, and then way too hard on Haida. Like, well, this is an aggressive man who really cares, and I don't know.
Why did Tada have to not believe in marriage? My sexy Elon Musk donkey.
I was not ready to see Retsuko become the next Grimes. Was not ready for that either.
Yeah, no,
I'm glad.
I'm completely joking. I'm very glad she does not end up with Tadano.
The ideal ending for me is Retsuko and Inui, obviously, because they interact so much in the series, and then Tadano and Haida.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Aren't those some big brain moves? Those are the perfect pairings. Let's see like a double gay wedding at the end of season 4. But actually, I think that is kind of like where I'd like to pivot next is, Lisa, do you have any thoughts about season 4? Hopes, sort of ideas or theories that they might lean in the direction of that could rectify a lot of these really glaring problems at the end of season 3?
I think as long as they sort of they have no choice but to do like a fresh start like every season, right? But they need to carry over Retsuko's trauma. They need to carry over Haida's issues and highlight it as issues. And that's my only ask from season 4, truly. What about you?
No, I agree with you basically. Right on the mark. I would be extremely disappointed if they continue that frivolous treatment of the trauma like they did at the end of the season and kind of consider it as something that had no effect on her. We need to see that actualized. Like, she went through something really, really hard, and that is going to color her life, and I hope they don't just ignore that. And oh boy, I do not have the blueprint for how they can fix Haida as a character, but I know they need to do something. They have to address it. And right, like you said, probably the most obvious angle is to give him maybe consequences for his actions. Like, really address the way that he's been acting and thinking up until this point is not good. It's not romantic. It's not in the space of being a quote unquote good friend, even if he believes that to be the case. Yeah, what I have noticed about each season of Aggretsuko is, you're right, they kind of start with a clean slate every time. This sort of idol aspect was very interesting. I don't know if many fans were expecting it. And I'm very curious to see what season 4's angle is going to be. Yeah, I guess overall, all I can say is this series is one that I have a very love and hate relationship with, but I want to love it, Lisa. You know what I mean? I have high hopes for them, and I really hope that they can get back on track and fix a lot of the consumers and fans' complaints and criticisms so that we can get back on the loving train a bit more.
For me, the bad of Aggretsuko does not outweigh the good. I think there are so many positive female depictions in this show that are unique, that are fun, that are, flawed, that are gray. There's women supporting women. How often do you see that in like a workplace environment in an anime? Like, it's so fun and validating to follow Retsuko's journey through sometimes very like hard and traumatic arcs, but I've never seen a character as passive as she is and takes so much bullshit, and it makes me happy to see in a weird way, because I'm like, okay, this is me. And seeing her and seeing how sometimes pathetic, I don't know if that's the right word, but hard, I realize that I don't want that for me. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And in a way, it's nice, because it's nice to know that other women feel this way and have these really difficult experiences and struggle to break out of their passive voice. And it's also teaching me that I don't want to be Aggretsuko. I don't want to be locked into this persona, this good girl persona. And yeah, that's I brought a lot of like I'm just sorry, I'm like messing up my words, because Retsuko, I've never seen a character so insecure and so flawed and passive, so aggressively passive.
Yeah.
And it's validating. It's so validating. even if the season 3 was bad, I just want this series to continue.
No, it is extremely validating, and if you kind of can pick apart our criticisms, they're not with Retsuko. We love Retsuko so much. We're cheering her on, and we have high hopes for the next season to do her justice, right? It's really like a lot of the other characters' treatments that we have a problem with. But I wanted to comment something about similar to Lisa, I also still believe that the good things outweigh the bad. I think season 3 really dropped the ball at the end, and if I were to recommend this to a friend, I would give them a thorough like content and trigger warning to be like, if you want to proceed, these are the risks. But it's quite amazing that we get a animated series like this that features so many things that we might consider kind of not quote unquote realistic. The fact that they're anthropomorphic, and the fact that also the series is really short. I don't think any episode is longer than 10 minutes, but still created just one of the most relatable series I've ever seen. The focus,
it really utilizes its time, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like, it is a very smart show. Like, just quick animator thoughts. I love to see an anime using rigs. It's using rigs. I love the sustainability of that. I love how they utilize the time where I think the episodes aren't like 24 minutes, right? They're like 12.
They're 10.
Is that correct?
Yeah, around 10.
Yeah. But they are able to stuff a lot of comedy, a lot of story into those small episodes. And it's healthy for this industry, I think. I need to see more shows like this.
Yeah, like for a show that I think, I'm not obviously an animation expert, but it seems to lean on the more easy to do. There's not a lot of crazy things happening on screen. It's, again, like you said, it uses rigging. It's masterfully done, honestly, that in such a short amount of time they're able to get so much across. I feel like in the span of 3 seasons featuring 10-minute episodes, we were able to get different character arcs and storylines all jammed within a time frame that some other stories take for like one fighting sequence.
That's so true. I mean, I feel as though there's such a diverse cast of characters, and again, like we were saying, you get the sense that they're all 3-dimensional, even if they aren't like explicitly showing like a long ass backstory for them.
Yeah.
It's just the little things that you see with even a character like Anai. He has a girlfriend that he cares for and he loves cooking. It's those little things that help them flesh out the characters in a way that they don't have to spend like 5 minutes going through their whole life story, but you suddenly see them 3D now.
Yeah, and the choice of combining like a charming animal like character designs, which on the surface seem like it's going to be like a lighthearted story, and then actually adding so much depth to it, created just a very interesting dichotomy and juxtaposition. Like, I really still can't believe I relate more to a red fox 25-year-old female office worker than I have to a lot of other characters that might more closely align to my actual attributes as a person. I don't know if they're fully conscious of this, but the characters are written in a way that they really feel like they're meant to allow audience members to project onto them. Like, especially Retsuko, right? But all these others, and in general, maybe I'm not a fan. I'm, like, in theory, not a fan of shows creating characters in a way that are meant to be like a stereotype, or like meant to be a person that encapsulates a lot of that, of a certain specific type of person. But like, Aggretsuko does not read that way to me in a negative sense. It really is like, wow, I love that all of these characters encompass so many different aspects of maybe similar types of people, and you're able to project and really feel deeply connected to them in a way that I think few other shows have been able to do.
Sure. I mean, that's Sanrio's whole agenda. From the start with Hello Kitty, I learned this in a character design class, actually. The reason why Hello Kitty doesn't have a mouth is because you're supposed to project your emotions onto her. So, and also, with their recent characters such as Gudetama, I'm sure that you've heard It's supposed to reflect like young Japanese people's attitudes and depression and the indulgence of wanting to be lazy. That's Senrya's whole MO. And I can see it integrated into Aggretsuko's writing so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched a Vox video about it, so you can say I'm kind of an expert on Gudetama.
Oh my gosh, I do have one last thing to say.
Yeah.
Again, this is another Mamoru Hosoda like rant that it's in the same vein as what I had in that episode. I was researching Aggretsuko and like reviews for Aggretsuko. I am so tired of seeing reviews that are like, isn't it so bizarre that there's like a really adult story about the society in Japan, but then it's like this cute creatures that are embodying this adult story? Wacky Japan. Like,
Lisa, you shouldn't have told me that. My volcano is about to erupt again.
Why can't you say it's cool? Why can't you say it's a smart pairing? Why does it have to be so weird? Why does it have to be wacky? Why does it have to say stuff about Japan? I don't know. I hate that. I really hate that. I'm sorry. That's just my Aggretsuko rant.
No, I have a personal gripe with that as well, because within my personal art style, it has always leaned more like whimsical and fun and cute. And sometimes I've done work where I take that, but also combine it with more sort of adult elements and whatnot. I remember one time a friend of mine was like, I unfortunately can't remember the comic artist's name, but was like, oh, I talked to this comic artist today that does a similar thing in their work where they use a sort of almost childlike but like cutesy style with more mature content. And his stance is, just because something is visually cute doesn't mean it can't also have profound messages. Those are not mutually exclusive. And I hold that so close to my heart. I hate it when people think that things that look a certain way or presenting in a more maybe like when they assume it would be more desirable for a younger audience means that adults can't also find enjoyment or meaning behind it or significance. Because yeah, all of those criticisms in those reviews that you read, Lisa, where they're like, oh, like, this is crazy, you would pair the two. I'm like, no, this is genius. This is actually such a smart juxtaposition. It makes it so much more interesting. Who the heck do you think would actually have wanted to watch the series if all the characters were like kind of designed like human-like, and
if
it's like
they all look like Family Guy?
Yeah.
Frick, no. But actually, maybe yes, because Western audiences do kind of enjoy that stuff. But I think it's the Western understanding that a lot of animation styles have to really fit the tone and the theming of the show, and it's unexpected to see that subverted. But to me, it's genius. It's smart. It's fun. It's different. And it doesn't have to be weird or crazy or wacky. It can just be cool or interesting. It's the wording, I guess, that really bothers me.
No, I agree. And I also believe that such pairings usually create a lot more nuance. It's so much more interesting on so many different levels. I don't want to see a animation where like maybe they're all adults and the lighting is dreary and it's super realistic. Like, the fantastical of elements of Aggretsuko don't somehow make it less relatable or realistic. It actually just elevates the medium much more. And anyway, what we're saying obviously right now can be applied to a lot of things. Like, I'm thinking of other series that might have done a similar thing, maybe to sometimes more, sometimes less of a degree, like Madoka. Like, how many people praise that as being subversive because it did a similar thing? It gave you a style that made you think you were going to get one thing, and then you get a different thing. I have not finished Madoka, right. However. I'm just saying this based on what everybody else has told me and what you've told me, Lisa.
Watch out for our Madoka episode. I'm just kidding.
We might. I'm still in the process of watching it, but I would love to discuss it if given a chance. But I think that's a good place to. Is that a good place to end it?
I think so. This episode was quite long, I have to say. I was not anticipating that.
We always think that we can do an easy episode this time, but there's just so much to say. And actually, I think the note we'd like to end on is that despite our criticisms, Lisa and I both do dearly love Aggretsuko, and we have many hopes that the next season is going to sort of address all of the problems we've had with it thus far and hopefully elevate it even more. I have hope they can do it because it's a very talented team. They're telling a very nuanced story that a lot of people, especially adults, can resonate with, and I appreciate that so much because we have few stories like Aggretsuko that are easily accessible to us right now.
Absolutely. I'm excited for the future of the series.
Update episode?
Even though it looks a little bit bleak.
Update episode in the future? I was like, update
oh
episode in the future?
We just do like a live, like, just record ourselves watching it together.
Yeah, live reacts. Catch us on Twitch.
Yeah. But anyways, thank you so much for listening in to Heart to Hato, the Aggretsuko episode. Please consider supporting this podcast wherever it may be posted, and please let us your 2 cents about Aggretsuko.
Yes, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.